Hey y'all, and welcome to Rebel with a Cause, Called to the Case. I'm Kitty. Thank you for joining me today. I know that these episodes aren't easy to listen to, and I'm grateful that you're here, ready to sit with the truth, even when it's painful. Today we are honoring the life of Nola Q. Dinkins. She was just 3 years old. Not a headline, not a court case, a little girl, and she should be here right now, laughing, playing, learning, and asking a million questions like toddlers do. Instead, her name is attached to the tragedy that shocked Maryland and Delaware this summer. But this episode isn't just about the crime that took her life. It's about who she was, what happened, and what we can do to keep it from happening again. I want to say up front that this is going to be a hard listen. We're going to talk about child abuse, her violent death, and betrayal of trust. I'll do everything I can to handle these details with care and compassion. If you need to pause, take a breath, or step away for a little while, that's okay. Your own well-being matters too. I also want you to know that I believe every child's life has God-given worth. Every child deserves to be safe, and that's part of why I tell these stories, not for shock, but to remember, to honor, and hopefully make a difference. So let's talk about little Nola. Nola Q. Dinkins was 3 years old. She was small enough to be scooped up in your arms, young enough to believe every promise you made her. She had big, beautiful eyes and a bright smile that lit up her whole face. Just looking through her pictures, her adorable smile lit up my face too. Her family says that she was vibrant and joyful, and she made a lasting impression on everyone who met her. One neighbor said that she had an infectious energy. Even at 3, she changed the mood in a room just by being there. Her father described her on the family's fundraiser page as playful, joyful, the kind of little girl who left you smiling. That's who she was, not just a victim of a senseless crime, a beautiful child, a daughter, a granddaughter, a tiny human who deserved years and years of birthdays, playground trips, bedtime stories, and to grow up into a woman and maybe have her own family one day. Who knows? That would have been her choice. But all of that was taken from her and her loved ones. I do believe that we owe it to her to learn what she went through. To me, it's a way that we can be there for her now. She was alone in it when it happened, but by listening to what she endured, we don't leave her alone in it. Because unfortunately, we can't change what happened already. If that makes any sense, I apologize that I am not good at describing my thoughts. I want you to imagine her the way that her loved ones described her. As a 3-year-old running to her dad, a child who liked coloring books and teddy bears, who asked questions about bugs and clouds, who needed someone to tuck her in at night and tell her that she was safe. That's the little girl that we ultimately need to remember. Nola was living in Cecil County, Maryland, in a little town called Northeast. It's a small community of about 4,000 people. It's the kind of place with old churches, local shops, green fields rolling towards the Chesapeake Bay. Quiet, close-knit in some ways, like rural and small-town places, but it's not without its struggles. Poverty, family stress, generational trauma, but it's the kind of town where people hold candlelight vigils for a child they'd never met, simply because her loss was too much to ignore. Nola's family roots were in Indiana. That's where both her parents were from originally, but in 2024, they were no longer together. Like so many families, they went through a long, painful custody battle. Court records would eventually show years of fighting over where she would live, who would have custody, and how often she'd visit the other parent. At the time of her death, Nola's mother, Darian Randall, was the custodial parent. But there was an agreement that Nola's father would have her for summer visitation. He was waiting for her, planning for her visit, and looking forward to seeing her. But that visit never happened. Custody battles are so hard. I've been through it myself. And if you've been through it too, you know how hard it can be. How much anger and fear can build up, and how messy it can get with lawyers, and everyone thinks they're right. But no matter what, It's between the adults, and children don't get to choose. They don't get a vote, they don't get a say, and they're the ones that have to pay the price when the adults can't figure it out. They just want to be loved. They want both parents. They want to be safe. I think sometimes that we forget that in the middle of custody orders and court dates, that there's a little face looking up at us, asking, am I safe? Do you love me if I still love my parent? Can I stay here? And when you're fighting someone that you used to love and now probably hate, the most important thing is to remember the child. That's what should have mattered most. Now, there was a lot of stress in this family. Documents would later reveal repeated motions filed, multiple hearings and disputes about where Nola would live. These things don't happen in a vacuum. They wear people down. They make them desperate and sometimes reckless. But let's be clear, stress does not excuse abuse. Anger doesn't justify violence, and no court dispute ever justifies hurting a child or another human at all. It's hard to talk about this because so many people know what it's like to be in this kind of fight. But understanding how family tension can turn deadly is part of preventing it in the future. We have to notice warning signs. We have to pay attention to people who seem overwhelmed, angry, resentful of their kids. We have to be willing to ask hard questions because children's lives depend on it. At the time Nola died, her mom was living near the Delaware-Maryland border. It's a region where jurisdictions can get confusing. You're in Delaware one minute and Maryland the next. Police departments have to coordinate carefully when something crosses those lines. And it's important to know that because when this case exploded, it quickly involved law enforcement from multiple states. And it would reveal a truth more horrible than anyone was prepared for. If you're in a custody battle, please put the child first, even when it feels impossible. Even when you're hurt, even when you're angry. They're watching, and they're learning from you. They need you to protect them, even when it hurts you to do the right thing. It was June 10th, 2025, a Monday, a day that should have been ordinary, but instead it turned into the day that Nola disappeared forever. That morning, Darian Randall, Nola's mother, called 911 in Newark, Delaware. She told police that Nola had been abducted, not just taken, abducted at gunpoint. She said that she had been forced out of her vehicle by an armed man who stole her child. You can imagine how the police reacted. They took this seriously immediately. That kind of call sets off every alarm, every parent's worst nightmare. The police didn't wait. They issued an Amber Alert. Her name and face went out across the state of Delaware. Phones buzzed with emergency tones, and people pulled over their cars to read the alerts. News outlets began to cover it. A little girl was missing, taken at gunpoint. For those first few hours, it was chaos. Checkpoints, patrol, descriptions of suspects, alerts pinging social media. Amber Alerts are designed for this, fast, wide, urgent, because those first few hours after an abduction are critical. That's when children are most likely to be found alive. So the police scrambled. They followed leads. They looked for the car, and they tried to confirm the suspect description. They set up roadblocks. They asked for witnesses, and they searched. But pretty soon, things weren't adding up, and the timeline didn't make any sense. Witnesses didn't see what Darian said they'd seen. Her description of the gunman kept changing. Investigators began to doubt the story, because even under stress, certain details stay the same. If you're telling the truth, but lies, they fall apart. By the end of the day, police no longer believed that there was an abductor, and they didn't think there had been any carjacking. They began treating the mother as not as a witness, but as a suspect. The Amber Alert was canceled. That's a rare, chilling moment when authorities decide it's not an abduction anymore, but it's a homicide investigation. Imagine being in the community that day, seeing those alerts, praying that Nola would be found, and then realizing she wasn't taken by a stranger. She was gone in a way that was so much worse. It would almost be better to be able to blame a monster that we don't know. But so often the danger is in their home. It's someone the child trusted, someone the child loved, someone they should have been able to run to for safety. When police turned their investigation towards Darian Randall, they began retracing every step of her day. They got search warrants. They interviewed people that she'd seen. They checked her phone. They pulled surveillance footage. And they weren't looking for a kidnapper, but for evidence of a crime committed by a mother against her own child. Meanwhile, Nola's father was waiting in Indiana, waiting for his daughter to come for summer visitation, waiting for news. Instead, he was told his child was missing and that there was an Amber Alert at first, but then that it had been canceled. And now the police believe that she was dead. So hard to find words for that grief. The kind of pain that doesn't even have language attached to it. This is a tragedy. And at the heart is a little girl who trusted her mother to keep her safe. Instead, her mother told police a lie about being stolen away at gunpoint. A lie to try to hide what really happened. Police were no longer looking for suspects' cars. They were looking for a body. I know that's heavy. And to anyone listening who's feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to be emotional during this. We're not supposed to be okay with any of this. As investigators closed in, they began to focus on a particular address, a property in Northeast Maryland, just over the state line. It belonged to Darian Randall's boyfriend, 𝒃𝓃. They searched his property, and they used cadaver dogs. They looked for any sign of where Nola could be, and they found signs of something horrible. There was an odor of bleach in parts of the home. They found a child's blanket with traces of blood. They found cleaning supplies, and eventually they found the unthinkable. So brace yourself. This is going to be hard to hear. Behind the house, in a suitcase, wrapped in layers of saran wrap, were the remains of little Nola Q. Dinkins, just 3 years old, discarded, hidden, as if she was something to be thrown away instead of buried with dignity. And when the news broke, it shocked the community. Not just because she was dead, but because of the way she was disposed of. Because the lengths her mother and her mother's boyfriend to hide what they'd done to her. Nola's father, back in Indiana, was told his daughter was gone, and that her body had been found in a suitcase, and that she'd been beaten, and the woman who was supposed to have protected her was accused of killing her. It's impossible to imagine that call. Neighbors of Northeast Maryland were horrified. They held vigils and wept for a child they'd never met, because there's something sacred about a child's life that demands witness. Darian Randall was questioned for hours. She eventually confessed, according to the charging documents. She told investigators that she beat little Nola with a belt, not just once or twice, but 15 to 20 times. She claimed she had lost control and kept striking her, and at some point, Nola stopped breathing. It's absolutely unbearable to think about, but that's why it matters that we talk about it. We can't just look away and pretend that this didn't happen. That's how we get the strength to help fight it. Police say that Randall panicked, and instead of calling 911 or trying to save Nola, which would mean having to admit what she'd done, instead she chose to wrap her sweet tiny daughter's body in saran wrap and put her in a suitcase. And for some strange reason, her boyfriend, 𝒃𝓃, decided to help her with that and put that poor baby on his property. 𝒃𝓃 was charged with accessory after the fact and with failing to report a death. According to police, he didn't kill Nola, but he helped cover it up. He led them to the location of her remains when questioned. These details are hard, but it's the truth of what little Nola endured. And this wasn't an accident. This was a homicide, a deliberate act, followed by a plan to hide it, and a lie to police that sent the entire state into a panic with a fake Amber Alert, wasting valuable time and resources when she knew it was a lie, allegedly. If there's one thing we can do to honor Nola, it's to promise that we won't look away, that we'll listen, and we'll ask hard questions, that we'll speak up even when it's uncomfortable. This case raises questions about custody, domestic violence, and child welfare, and how we can improve the systems meant to protect kids that sometimes fail to do so. To be clear, most parents in custody battles would never do anything like this. Most parents are just trying to do the best they can with their circumstances. But there are warning signs, in some cases, red flags, evidence of anger, violence, neglect, and too often those warning signs aren't taken seriously until it's too late. Child welfare workers are overwhelmed and courts are backed up. Judges see case after case, and we can clearly see there are many cracks in our system, and the children fall through them far too often. Nola's death demands us to do better, but Nola's story isn't the only one like this. Far from it. In the United States, thousands of children die every year from abuse and neglect. Not all of them make the news, get Amber Alerts, vigils, donations, but their lives were just as precious, their deaths just as wrong. That's the hard truth. To Nola's father and grandparents, to anyone who loved her, you're not alone. We see you, and we grieve with you. I know this has been heavy. It's supposed to be, because the truth should weigh on us. It should move us to act. I know you might feel helpless, but you need to know that you are not. You can make a difference. Even small acts matter. Together, we can make a better future by demanding change and building a world where fewer children have to be remembered like this. Thank you so much for staying with me through this difficult episode of Rebel with a Cause, Call to the Case, and for caring enough to listen. As long as we say her name, she's not forgotten. And as long as we care, there's hope that we can build something better for every child. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay compassionate, and stay called. Goodbye.